Ah, we are live, I see. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this conversation. Women Leading Under Pressure. With no roadmap, what is your compass? We will begin this conversation with permission from our elders, guidance from our ancestors, and we acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. My name is Makeda Zulu Gillespie, and I'm honored to be the Executive Director of the University of Minnesota's Robert J. Jones Urban Research Outreach and Engagement Center, affectionately known as UROC. This event is part of UROC's Critical Conversations, a public discussion series that brings together scholars, activists, historians, artists, and community leaders who address urban issues and ideas. Building on UROC's many community campus collaborations, this series is intended to be a gathering place for urban-focused research, dialogue, and cultural events. These conversations happen because of the exceptionally talented, committed UROC staff and support from Andy Furco, the Associate Vice President for the Office of Public Engagement. As you can imagine, I am honored to hear from 4 dynamic leaders who have personally inspired me long before January of 2020, but even more so now. Thank you, Joan T.A. Gable, President of the University of Minnesota, Alika P. Gallery, co-pastor of Liberty Community Church, Sean Pierce, Economic Development and Inclusion Policy Director for the City of Minneapolis and the Mayor's Office, and Stella Whitney West, CEO of North Point Health and Wellness. Thank you for leading and being here today. We are also joined by talented University of Minnesota student and UROC staff who are leading our technology and will moderate the second half of our conversation. Jennifer Afefame, Jessica Forrester, Shaughnessy Johnson, and Chua Zhang. Tonight's conversation will begin with prepared questions that our distinguished panelists have had a chance to review. Then 2 or 3 questions will be selected by the students. You need to submit your questions into the Q&A section of the webinar. The regular cadence of our institutions and communities has been disrupted by multiple pandemics, including COVID-19, racism, and Afro-pessimism. As our panelists prepare to share their guides in making key decisions, let us hear from our Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan.
Hello, I'm Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, and I'm grateful for the chance to be part of this virtual Hello, I'm Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, and I'm grateful for the chance to be part of this virtual table tonight on such an important topic. Thank you to the team at the U's Urban Research and Outreach and Engagement Center for hosting this great event and for bringing us all together. And thank you for the work that you do each and every day to serve your community and our state. You have quite the agenda ahead of you with the chance to hear directly from leaders who are doing the work. And all of the students joining us tonight, this is for you. I know that this year has been unlike any other. I see you, and I'm grateful for your resilience, for making school, life, jobs, and everything else work. I'm Lieutenant Governor. I'm also a mom. My 7-year-old daughter is often a frequent visitor on many of my video calls and is developing her leadership skills every day. But she's also the reason I do this work and the reason that I keep going. To answer one of your important questions for the night, she and all Minnesota's children across the state are growing up, learning, and navigating this unprecedented time. Refill my cup. This is what drives my work. I have been a child advocate for most of my career. The governor and I are working every day to support Minnesota's families and to work towards a state and a reality where every child, no matter their race, gender, zip code, or any other factor, is seen, heard, and valued. That's what One Minnesota is all about. coming together across lines of difference to get things done for Minnesotans. And while the last 8 months have added new obstacles as we balance taking care of our loved ones, staying safe, and still showing up each day to do our work, the mission remains the same: to do the best we can, to do the best work we can for Minnesota's children and families. As you will hear from incredible leaders in our community on the upcoming panel, it's going to take all of us working together to make this reality come true. As women in leadership, no matter the sector or position in our communities, businesses, government, or families, we understand the extra pressures. I think I'm not alone in hearing the tiny voice in our heads questioning if we're even supposed to be here, or if we're good enough, if we're smart enough. Well, let me be a louder voice telling you that you absolutely deserve to be where you are, and that we absolutely need your voice. When women are at the decision-making table, it changes the conversation for the better. I'm an Indigenous woman and I'm a mom. At no time can I stop seeing the world through this lens. That's the lens I bring to the work that I do every day, and that matters. That's why I was excited when I read your title for tonight's conversation, Women Leading Under Pressure. With no roadmap, what is your compass? It's an important question for this exact moment, when women are stepping up and leading in new ways. It's exciting. For me, remembering who I am and telling that tiny voice to go away by bringing my daughter and my full Indigenous self to the table is how I try to stay grounded. So I'll leave you with a little advice that I received. Whoever you are, bring your full, authentic self to the table. Live your truth. That way the conversation will better reflect our communities, and the decisions made will be better, and they will serve those we are trying to serve. So Chi-miigwech, big thanks for everything that you have done, and Chi-miigwech for all of the things you will do moving forward together. Good luck with the rest of tonight's event.
Wow, well, that was wonderful. Lot to think about. So I'm giving a lot of direction because we are moving in a different way. So the first question, we'll start with President Gable, and then we will go to Pastor Galloway, Sean Pierce, then Stella Whitney West, and then on the second question, we will reverse that order. So the first question is, will you share your guides in making key decisions?
So I'll just jump in then, I guess. So I just have to start with a thank you to you, Makeda, for your leadership in general, and for giving us the opportunity to be together tonight, and for modeling for our students what it really means to be a community engaged leader and a partner. And we're just so fortunate to be able to do this tonight and to work together all the time. I'm grateful, and to everybody here tonight. So with that said, one of the first guides is appreciation, and making sure that people know that you do see them when the Lieutenant Governor says, I see you, or I hear you, I receive what you're saying, that there's that you're not just saying that, and that you do express regularly, especially in times like this, that you're grateful. I find that very helpful for me too, because right now it can be easy to wallow. This is a very hard time. And when I do my own inventory of appreciation, I'm happier. I'm just more energized and able to meet the challenge of the day. But when we're making really key decisions, I try to find a balance between my own gut, which is based on a lot of experience that have earned, and listening to other people. Now at the university, we're sort of baked that way because shared governance is our culture, and it's an expectation. It's how leadership is required to happen. But as the decisions get harder, the number of people who have the experience to do anything other than offer perhaps support or criticism gets smaller. And then you really have to listen to yourself. But gut can be risky, because gut can be based on experiences that aren't necessarily applicable. It can be infused with the inner voice that the Lieutenant Governor was describing. So I also try to be very overt about listing the values around a decision or around something we're trying to do. That's what we've been doing during the pandemic. We started with a discussion of our values, what we were trying to accomplish, and when we're confused, when we face a dilemma, when we have multiple options on the table and we have to choose, we stop and say, okay, which of these gets us closest to what we said was the spine or the heart of what we were trying to accomplish? And so we assign our values, we remember to be grateful, we communicate a lot, and then we move forward.
Thank you.
That was fabulous. And I'm going to start with some gratitude just for the privilege and the honor of being here. I come from folks who pick cotton and that were enslaved, and very proud of third grade educations. And so to be on this kind of panel is an amazing gift of God and of the ancestors. And I am grateful and glad to be with my distinguished guests. So as all of you, I have to make decisions every day. And it seems like oftentimes I have to make them on the run. You know, I am by nature an introvert, love processing, love the intellectual stimulation that comes with that. But this era, I oftentimes don't have the privilege of doing that. So when I think about leading in the dark without a compass, these are the things generally that I consider. I consider, is it loving? Is the decision that I'm making loving? And I'm not talking about a sentimentality, gushy, gushy, kishy, kishy. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about an attribute that looks and desires the best good for whoever I'm making the decision for. Then the other thing that I can, and I'm going to say this without, so it's not, this is not the most important thing. This is not an hierarchical era. This is actually how all of it kind of comes together. The next question that I ask is, how will the decision I make today impact 5 generations out? So the decision I make today, how will it impact 5 generations out? The other question, and because, and I so much appreciate President Jones' conversation around values, because those are core values that are instinctive for us and for me. So I think about 5 generations out, but I also think about the 5 generations before me. So as we look at, I know we're going to talk a little later about the 19th Amendment, I think about those African Americans who struggled in that process. But so what would they think of the decision that I make, so that I honor and consider the 5 generations out, but I also consider ancestral wisdom. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod. I'm going to consider that as I consider my decisions. And then I'm also going to pray about it, because I understand, and this is not, y'all knew, it's that, you know, so I'm not trying to take a text, but to be my most authentic self, I understand that there is a power greater than me. And so I'm going to seek the universe's or God's or whoever you choose to call it will and opportunity. And oftentimes I can't hear that clearly. I don't know. But I know that if my intention is right, that the universe, that God, that Jesus will afford me the opportunity that when I am wrong, to correct it. I believe in the power of love and grace. And that's how I make my decisions. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It is such a treat to be with you all. It is, you know, Pastor Galloway, I was just appreciating the moment of going to church as someone who is spiritual and who also shares that heritage with you. So thank you for sharing that. It feels like a good entry. You know, and I think it really speaks to my guides, right? And my grandmother always said, being a woman of the Christian church, and I have a different spiritual relationship, but I honor and believe that many of our traditions, particularly our Abrahamic traditions, come in the same vein, right? My grandmother always said, when you're walking into something difficult, or if you're walking into something important, tell God to go before you and go with you. Go before you and go with you. And so in my role and in my life, right, there's the position, there's the title, and then there's just like my role in the world and in community these days. I have a few guides that I have allowed myself to live in, even when faced with really no right answer. And I truly believe that is my role. I think the first for me is always the people. I always tell people, it doesn't matter if I'm in education, directly in economic development, in policy, in science, it's always the same for me. I believe that when the people are at the forefront, you will just have the best possible outcome. And any negotiation of that is fundamentally going to be a problem. So I start there. For me, what are my people going to think? What do I know? I shouldn't have to go and ask 20 community members what they think about something. At this point in my career, I need to know that. And if I don't bring that to the table, then frankly, I'm failing. And so that is a guide. I think without having to call, I think about like, what is Makeda going to think about this? Right? What is Devon going to say about this? What is Bill going to say about this? What is Shannon thinking? What is Tanessa thinking? What is my grandmother going to say? What is my family going to say? First, that's where I start. The folks that I don't talk to every day, but who I know are just pouring really buckets and buckets of energy and love and heart into this work. And then I have to go in and really think to myself, where is the alignment of my heart, my mind, and my spirit? And I would say earlier in my career, I didn't do that. I'm an introvert, very logical person, and I would get lost in my head. And every time I've done that has been a grave mistake, because I really do believe that as a part of my purpose, I have to listen to where spirit is telling me to go. And my heart has to be in it, because if my heart isn't in something, I can't fight for it. And this work is about fighting. It's about fighting for what's just. It's about fighting for the truth. And in all of that, I'm always thinking about the legacies of those who come before me, those who come with me. I mean, I am an American descendant of slavery, right? And that means something. It means something to be in a country, in my country, that my people built with the help of others, and really forcibly in many instances. It means something to be a part of this. And so I had the really fortunate reality of growing up in Chicago and growing up as a part of majority culture, right? Being around Black people, with grandparents who are from Alabama and Mississippi and New Orleans, right? So the deep South, and who carry that. And my grandmother, I'll talk a bit about this later, but my grandmother passed this year, and at nearly 90. And when I was 16, my granddad passed at almost 100 years old, right? And so it would just be unacceptable to deviate from the truth that they bring as folks who, again, did not even have a high school education, did not have all of those things. And so I carry that with me, thinking about if the work that I'm doing in the way that I'm doing it is going to lead to the implementation of the outcome that the people who have come before me have been working so hard for. Does it lead to the solution that they were trying to implement? And it's not just one group, but for me, it does start with ADOS people, because I believe that there's a spirit and a continuity that is there. And then I think in my role, I finally always come back to the magnitude of impact and how fast we can move. At the city, I always kind of chuckle. I tell the mayor this all the time. I was like, look, here's the thing. People are struggling sometimes in the city, not because we're doing bad work. There's some things that need to be improved. Let me tell you, multi-100-year-old organization. But the struggle is that we're taking this oil tanker and we're trying to change it into a sailboat to really deliver results. And it is painful to move at that speed. It's painful to implement that amount of change. But I think that's really the final test for me, is like, is this a symbolic action? Maybe that's okay. Is it a symbolic action that is going to have meaningful, quantifiable change and results for people who can't afford to wait? When your people have been in a country and been, downtrodden since 1526, 3 years is a long time. 4 years is a long time. And so I want to move with that urgency, And finally, in all of this, just as I ask for grace, because I don't get a chance to call everybody, text everybody, return every email, send every smoke signal, I really try to extend that to others and just remind people like, hey, if you didn't hear from me, but you talked to someone who knows the work that we're doing every day, and they said, yeah, this is on and we need you to be in, then trust that we're going to connect up, trust and say yes, and be a part of that work and find your way to be a part of it. Those are really my guides. And I'll say that when I'm a part of anything that falls outside of those, I've noticed that they take a back burner. Like I'm more interested in the creation than I am in dismantling too much of anything.
Okay, so there's the advantage of going last is that you can pretty much pick up on what everybody else has said. So I'm just amazed at how many folks have said that they are introverts. So I'm going to claim it as well because I truly am an introvert, and I never would have thought that any of you are introverts, but that just says that I'm in good company. I'm with my people. So when you talk about making key decisions, and what are your guides? Being the CEO over a healthcare organization that has a number of employees, but also that responsibility for a community, for people's health. So key decisions for me are decisions that can have a profound impact on people. And so one of the things that I'm always presented with is data. We collect a lot of data. We have data on our patients. We look at data, or I look at data that has been collected through the county, through the state, everywhere. Federal data, looking at what are some of the health inequities, what have you. So always looking at that, looking at data that happened yesterday, or looking at data that is going on in real time, right? So I look at that, but then I also say, so what is the story behind the data? Because you can look at the data, but then you have to understand that that data, there's a story that goes with the data. There are people that go with the story behind the data. So you can't just, so there are people who make decisions just based on the data. I don't do that. You've got to also look at the story and the people behind the decisions. And again, we're talking about key decisions. And then I have people around me, my team. I rarely make any key decision without bringing them, assembling them. We meet on a regular basis, but if there's a really key decision, it could be a joint email, it could be a phone call. Hey, I want to make sure everybody is all in. It doesn't mean that I'm not taking responsibility for that decision, but I want to make sure that I've heard others, because you have blind spots, and I recognize that. So then after that, then there is what I call the kitchen cabinet. And one of my wise sister friends told me this long before I became in this role. And she said, women are wise, right? She said, make sure you have your kitchen cabinet. Your kitchen cabinet are those friends, mainly girlfriends, right? Many of them are, sometimes I call them my old school friends that we grew, because I was born and raised in Minnesota. So I have old school friends that still live here, right? That you can call and you can let your hair down. You can just say, look, girl, this is what's going on. What would you do? And you can describe it, and they're going to give you the truth. They're not looking at you as CEO. They're looking at you as Stellas. I've known you for 100 years. This is what I'm going to tell you. And they're the same ones that are going to say, I know this is what you want to do. This is what you would normally do. And I'm going to talk you off the ledge. I'm going to tell you, hold up, calm down. Let's break this down, right? You know those kind, that's your kitchen cabinet, right? They're not going to sugarcoat it. They're not going to they're going to say, calm down, calm down. Did you think about this? Let's call so-and-so. So going through all of those, then I come to my decision. But again, the important thing is you own it. You own that decision and you have to stand by it. And I like the idea, I think it was Sean that said grace. You always make sure that you approach it with grace and that you receive grace.
So before we go to the next question, because this was brought up, President Joan, are you an introvert?
So I thought I was. So I call myself an extroverted introvert. I know that's a little bit precious to describe it that way, but I am absolutely fueled by the company of interesting, good people, but I run out of gas and then I need to be alone. And one of the lessons I've learned is not only to listen to that, but also to surround myself with people who understand that so that you don't have to apologize.
Thank you. So my next question, I want to follow up because you all have given so many nuggets and we're getting a lot of conversation in the chat box about how inspired people are to hear you all today. You all are the leaders of spiritual organizations, municipal government, health organizations, and Research One land grant university. There are a lot of people who look to you to solve problems and to lift them up and to lead the way. But I know that has to get to be a little bit tiring sometimes. So I want to know, how do you refill your cup? And remember, we are reversing. Oh, yes, we can just pop.
I have water in my cup, but I'm so drunk by all of this great stuff. I forgot what you told me to do. So this is my order, and I'm gonna state it, but I'm also gonna confess that I'm not good at what I'm getting ready to say. So I want to be clearly transparent because, like Sister Stella, I have the kitchen cabinet, and they're going to be texting me, Lika, you know you're lying. So I don't want to get in all that. So I'm going to tell y'all that I'm trying. I'm trying. So this is my theoretical self-care method. And it is rest. It is rest. Because I understand as a womanist ethicist that rest is an act of resistance for African-American females. This is a political maneuver. And it is important so that we can go for the long haul. We can sustain ourselves for the building up of the community. And it is also an act of love, of revolutionary love. And it is also an act of supreme grace. When you look at what you have accomplished and to be able to say that is enough for today. I am enough, but in order for me to stay here, I have to rest. Now, I'm at the age where I don't sleep well. There's some kind of hormone stuff that happens after a while. Let the church say amen. But even in that, instead of just doing those 4 hours and then jumping up and say, well, I got this to do. I say, you know what, even if I'm not sleeping, I'm gonna lay here in repose. Now I scare my husband because sometimes I lay there like this, you know, and he's like, Lika, what's up with that? But resting, I'm resting, or being able to say, you know what? There is power in no. When that whip hit my great grandma, she didn't get a chance to say no. No, no, nope, nada, not gonna do it today. and to be able to utilize really good tools that assist you in doing that, like social media, like only wearing black, so that in the event that you just don't feel like doing the laundry, you got another pair of black pants or whatever is necessary in order for us very seriously to utilize rest as resistance. So I'm going to presuppose that many of you know that I work very long and hard with beautiful Dr. Lauren Martin. And as we were beginning to think about opening up the Northside Women's Space, a safe place for women who have been victimized by the commercial sex trade, one of our first pieces, what our sisters told us, this was out of UROC, what do you need for you to move from the place you are now, if you choose, to the next venture in your life? And they said rest. So when we opened up that space and invited women and men and our trans brothers and sisters and members of the LGBTQII community to come in, and we just allowed them to sit down, it's a place of rest. It's a place of resistance, and we all need it.
Are we just going? Okay, I'll jump in. So self-care. There's a couple of things that I've been doing lately, and one of it came about because of as a team at North Point, we started these daily huddles, and when we had to come together because of COVID, right? And we had so many folks that were working remotely, and so we all couldn't be together. So we started doing these huddles. And the first part of the huddle is a mindfulness meditation. And so that was never any skill that I had, but then I started finding that I craved it. If I was in the car with my granddaughter driving her somewhere and it was time for the huddle and I'm turning it on, because that ritual of just relaxing and breathing intentionally and listening to your breath in that short period of time, it does center you. There's a certain amount of calmness that comes. And I think what we have learned is that when we're doing it together as a team, it builds that sense of team with all of us to be able to do that. And we do it virtually. And so that what I've noticed is that staff will be communicating in the chat, thanking who's ever leading the mindfulness moment. Oh, thank you so much, so and so. Oh, that was great. That was a good, poem that you read. And so that has become a ritual for me. And so I started meditating, praying in the morning, and journaling, writing down my thoughts. And I've learned that it doesn't take a lot of time. So I've got some books. I date the pages and I write my thoughts. And I'm actually writing my prayer in there. And that has become a ritual for me that about self-care. And I'm always the gratitude. I heard one of you say about being grateful, but being able to be grateful out loud, saying it, writing it down, thanking God or your creator, thanking just gratitude for the blessings that you have. It's such a wonderful part of self-care. And I'm going to also ditto Pastor Alika, sleep. I have learned that, and I've been passing it on to my daughter because sometimes she'll just be, and I say, honey, go to bed. Go to bed. Sleep. Don't worry about it. And if you get up early in the morning, guess what? You'll be renewed, refreshed, and you can do it. She's working on her PhD, you know her. And so she would just be staying up all, I'm like, girl, go to bed. Get in the bed and get up early if you need to. Get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then you'll find that that rest has now, you have a energy that you can complete that assignment. Because many of us know that you stay up too long, you start seeing things, you start getting crazy stuff that you go back and look at something that you wrote when you knew you stayed up too long, right? You're like, who wrote this? You did. When you had deprived your body of sleep, rest, right? It's crazy, but sleep, a good mattress, good bedding, good sheets, spend money on good sheets. Let me tell you.
I have a couple of things, and sometimes I separate the self-care that I do at work from the self-care I do in my personal life. And for me, that's important. Uh, I was thinking about this the other day because I'm only about a week or two into trying this sleep thing with a whole alarm to go to bed and get up. It's new. I think I like it. I feel like people like me better the next day after I sleep. We'll say that. Um, but I was thinking about this comments that one of our colleagues was making to me last year, and they're like, we were all talking. That there was this panel, and they're like, we were all talking about how like you're responding to our emails at 2:30, and then you're on this thing at 8 a.m. And I was like, oh, that is a problem. And it took someone else to reflect that back to me. And although I think I was more responsive and productive in those moments, I wasn't necessarily able to track the impact that was necessary. So now I'm finding those moments of respite really in the work week. So for me, it's two or three moments. On Fridays, actually, Devon Nolan facilitates this learning table process, and a group of us come together on Friday. And just the way that she does that and kind of moves us through, and we get to be grounded in this really, really I think a really beautiful project that has been marred by really technical realities of development. And we get to just be community from different parts of our space. And so that's a helpful break in my work week. I think also we have a core strategy team that's a part of this coalition, and getting to like really have a conversation with them about like, well, what it means if we're asking for investment and you can like invest in a building, but then our families are still making $28,000 annually, right? Like, are we really making a change? So those are sort of the breaks from all of the political attacks and all of just the politicking. Like, I'm not a Democrat Republican kind of person, but let me tell you, they drive me crazy. We need more people running for office who are not policymakers, please, business owners. And personally, one of the most important things that I do now relates directly to my grandmother. So I mentioned to my grandmother, we laid her to rest in February. For people that do know me, we know that last year we buried my mommy. So it's been kind of a rough, however many months, 19 or so months that I've been in anyway. And I actually appreciate the pause that 2020 has been bringing. But in January, I remember my grandmother saying to me, she calls me by a different name, so we'll deal with that later. Now you need to keep the family together. I was thinking to myself, what is wrong with my grandmother? Like, I live the furthest. I have so much to do. I'm an introvert. I don't have to be wanting to talk and text all these people. And she kept bringing it up every time I would see her, and I recorded these conversations. And lately, over the last month or so, I've been listening to those conversations when she was in a hospital or when she was home or we were listening to church music. And it just hit me a number of months ago, like, I actually have to figure this out. My grandmother didn't ask me for anything, but she was very clear about this, and I have to figure this out. And I have a very expansive family. It's a lot of us. It's a whole thing. It's a whole clan. We're all over the world, and a lot of us mostly spread out through the country. So I've been hosting these monthly Xander family meetups where we get on Zoom and, you know, you have your 12-year-olds and the 70 and 80-year-olds all wrestling. And for me, that's been a critical point of self-care because no matter how amazing and productive things can feel, this moment is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. And there are so many, for me, there's so many moments where like, that's a failure, like constant failure that, and I have weird ideas that other people think are crazy. And what I love about those moments is I get to hear like, oh, my cousin in Birmingham is thinking about that. My cousin that's sitting over in San Francisco that's 76 and was like literally working with King and Rosa Parks and all of these folks has something for me. My cousin that's sitting up in Pennsylvania in a rural town, like my uncle in Florida is sending her supplies because she can't go out because it's COVID. And like, there's something there. And then I hear about like, all of a sudden 7 of my cousins are engineers. And I'm like, oh, this is a thing. So it's really, really affirming to hear that even though we're apart and we don't talk about it, we have a shared perspective of what's happening in our country right now. And we have really similar perspectives about how our cities should operate. And we have very similar perspectives about how education should move. And they're like, oh, my ideas aren't crazy. You were thinking about that too. I've never even met you, cousin so-and-so from Florida. Great to hear that. And so I really, really have found that no matter what's going on, even when I don't want to have that conversation, the fact that on whatever day at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, I have to open up that call, I have to have my phone on to help people connect is like such a beautiful gift that my grandmother gave, that it like reminds me that I'm not in the wrong place. Do you know what I mean? I would say that the piece that I am struggling with is also related to the work, ironically. Like, I just think I would love to have more playtime. We don't play enough, y'all. We need playtime. And unfortunately, there's so much work time that often the people that we can find time with are the people we work with. And there have been so many moments of disappointment and betrayal over the last 3 years. But I still yearn that playtime. Like, I love hearing about when so-and-so is doing something with their kids, or like talking to someone saying, you know what, we should just go rent some snowshoes. And like I don't know who's snowshoeing, but we're gonna go snowshoe because it's $5 REI rentals, and we're gonna get out there and we're gonna walk together. Like, that matters, you know. Or my partner threw a big party for me. It was a surprise party, a big party. I don't like that many people. I'm an introvert, so it was really a party of 7 people that are very close that I already see every day. But like, just that they showed up at my house and they brought pizza and Lactaid. And like, we played games all night and we socially distanced and everybody just laughed. And now we do virtual bike rides together. Like, that matters, that playtime matters. And I want to be more consistent about the playtime.
So those are amazing suggestions. And I find myself humbled to even be offering anything in addition to what we've already heard. For me, I'll just say, because I want to answer the question, that for me, self-care is exercise, because I like feeling physically strong. It does more than just keep me healthy. But what I hear listening to all of this and reflecting, you know, having the benefit of going last and reflecting on all of that, is if you ask, you know, I'm looking at the participant, there's 158 people listening right now. If you ask 158 people, what makes you feel better, whole, recharged, loved, you'll get 158 different answers. And I think that one of the challenges we've had with this time that we're in, but I don't want to make the time that we're in the excuse, because there was a before and there will be an after, is that when we say you should take care of yourself, we don't really mean it, right? We mean, oh yes, you should take care of yourself, but still email me at 2:30 in the morning, and still listen to that little voice in your head that says you're not quite good enough. So if you don't do that much more, that if you stop, you're weak. If you stop, you're not enough. If you stop, you're not going to get where you hope to go. You won't have ownership of your journey, professionally or otherwise. And I think professionally is also a little bit of an excuse, but so do whatever makes you feel better, and don't ask for permission, and don't compare it to anyone else's. and insist. So for me, I have a life right now where it's very difficult for me to stop, right? It is very difficult for me to stop. I volunteered for this. No one's making me do it. It is the life, but I feel better when I exercise. So sometimes I have to get myself out of bed to do it. Sort of the opposite of what we heard from the pastor, right? But that makes me feel better, and that's okay. And sometimes I like to get in bed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's it for the day. And that's okay too. I don't get a lot of days like that, but I really like them when I have them. So I would say to people and I'm saying this as much to myself as I am to anyone who's listening, is whatever makes you feel better is self-care. And that is absolutely yours, and you should own it.
You all are giving life. I appreciate you all so much. We also have some young people that need to get on camera. So I know we have 2 more questions that I wanted to ask you, but I want to make sure that Shaughnessy Chua Zhang is curating the questions from the Q&A section. And Shaughnessy, if you could come on camera as I ask this last question, so that you can begin to moderate. Thank you, Shaughnessy. Did I tell you the resemblance is clear? Yes. So as I leave my section, I want us to consider, this year is the 100-year anniversary for many women being able to vote. And my question for you all is, what will the next 100 years look like for women? What would you like that to be? And you all answer in any order that you feel works for you.
Okay, I'll go first. I feel uncomfortable silence, or for me, uncomfortable silence. But when I saw this question, and McCade, of course, was gracious and gave us a chance to reflect in advance, and I thought that it's hard to think of it in a 100-year cycle. I can only think of it in my own increment, and that may be a bit of a self-focus. So I'm claiming my own increment, which will be less than 100 years. But but I would love for us to have panels like this because we want to, and not because we need to. And for us to be able to when we talk about how we define equity and being at the table, I would love for us to be in roles where we are not firsts, where we are not pioneers, and when we are not asked, what is it like to be you? And at the same time, if we want to get together as women, we sure do. Or with men, or not, or however we want to, that it is a non-issue. And I don't mean non-issue in that we can't call out differences and uniqueness and specialness and what that means and can be and what it brings, but that it is in no way considered a basis for limiting opportunity or voice or appreciation. So that's what I would like. I would like, when I'm finished with whatever it is I contribute, that no one says, and she was the first woman.
Okay, President Joe, that was going to be mine. And so I'm going to just take it because when I became CEO of Pilot City, North Point, that was whatever. Oh, you're the first woman. I'm like, okay, right. We definitely, so that we don't hear that anymore. That's gone in any capacity anywhere. Is not going to be, the next 100 years that somebody is going to be the first woman, first young girl in any position, and that doggone it, we are the majority. Is that right? That it should not be, if anything, it might be the opposite. Oh, you're the first man. You are the first man in this position. Oh my goodness, we have not had a man here in this leadership role in 100 years. Oh, that okay. I'm hanging my hat on that one too. But what I also want is that because as women and women leaders, we have always psychologically and even it has been taught and almost ingrained in us that we had to be like more like men. And we never had the opportunity to celebrate what makes us unique, where the power about being a woman lies, right? And so I want that to be up front and center, right? That there's just something about, because we all know it, when we connect with other women, our sisters, there's that connection that we have that fuels us, that gives us energy, and we're not apologizing for what, and we can share things with our sister friends, our women friends that and it needs to be something that we're not apologizing for, that we have to go off into a separate room and do. We're just doing it. We're doing it out loud, out in the open, right? And men are now looking at us like, dang, look at how they do that. But that's what I want. And that we really harness and celebrate the power that women have and the power that we have always had. I was having a discussion with, I think it was with my daughter, and we were talking about the leadership, and particularly we were talking about within the Black community, how it's typically been men, but yet we always know the women behind the scenes, the doers that put, right? And so we talked about during the civil rights era, right? It was the men who were out front, giving the speeches, the civil rights movement. But you dig down, and you didn't have to dig down very far. It was when you had something that you wanted it to be operationalized, it was the women, right? Who got it done, who organized and made it happen, right? So the next 100 years, we're doing that, but we're not doing it behind a man. We're not doing it behind the scenes. We're not doing it off in a room somewhere. We're doing it out loud, up front, and celebrating it as part of what makes us women and powerful. That's what I want to see. And no more first. For a man, maybe, but not for a woman.
So I'll go. You know, when we look at the 19th Amendment and the struggle for women to vote, it is so clear historically that it was riddled with issues of racism and classism and sexism, all three pieces. And so in the next 100 years for women, I would hope that we would bring our best selves, that there is a long forgotten poem written by MLK. And in this poem, he's describing this setting where children are asking him, what is racism? And they've heard the word, and then they go to the dictionary and it's not in there anymore. And they want go ahead and ask him about a word that they've heard named war. And they said, we looked at in the dictionary. It's not in there. Can you tell us about that? Now, that in some ways seems a little utopian, but because you invited us to dream, that's my dream, that we live interconnected, interdependent lives where issues of racism, sexism, classism, homophobia is not in the dictionary. It doesn't exist, that the healer and the physician are the same, and that mindfulness is part of everybody's practice and good intention, and Republicans and Democrats, there is no more, there is us. But I want to add another piece to that. I'm hoping in the next 100 years that there is not ecological devastation, that we consider the earth as a partner rather than a subject, that the earth becomes our partner, not just a place where we feed, but we give nothing back, where we look at the entire universe, the trees, and honor the trees, and honor the lion, and honor the lamb, and honor the ant. And all of that is considered a sense of not only creative genius, but interdependence. So Thich Nhat Hanh says that we are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness. So in the next 100 years, when Jaden Alexander has had 10,000 children, that's my grandson, I hope that they look in the dictionary and don't see this, and that they honor the earth, and as they honor the earth, they honor each other. And so we become one. And I know it's possible. With women leading, it's possible. I read something one time: knowing you will die, how shall you live? And I hope that the life that we lead in this panel speaks for us, and that just by our intention and our vocalization, that we are creating the next 100 years of possibility and peace.
Ashe to everything that's been said. For me, in the next 100 years, patriarchy will be eradicated. So that includes all of the ways in which we as women prop up and value toxic masculinity and patriarchy, because we have our roles in that, right? And generationally, I think particularly when we are around children or we have children, we have to be very careful about the ways in which we transmit that patriarchy to the kids, and sometimes the ways in which we force men to continue to perpetuate it when they are trying to break free. So I think we have to have that accountability. For me, we'll move away from using data to make decisions, and we also will talk about history, because part of the reality is that the data sets very intentionally didn't account for our history, and our history tells a much longer and more accurate truth about the current realities that we're in. We deal with this every day at the city today. A lot of people don't know this, but we're trying to figure out how to have more race conscious policy making. And today we're in yet another conversation. We're like, great, we maybe can pull all of these things that the city did wrong, but more importantly, we have to understand that the federal government did things. The financial market did some things. And so I shouldn't have to say that the city of Minneapolis wrote this policy for us to just remember that there was slavery and there was Jim Crow, so there was lynching, so there was exploitation, so there was redlining, so we just know those things. We don't, let us not spend 20 years trying to create a study to protect ourselves from things that we know are inevitable when you try to have just solutions to some of this really just frankly problematic reality that is hurting us all, including people who are not of color. For me, over the next 100 years, we're going to see reparations for ADOS people. Bottom line, we can have all of the love and forest and heart that we want. But if we have people in this country living in sewage in their own homes, when we have children going to school amongst sewage in their own homes, when we have people who don't have food to eat, when we have people who are forced into sex work because they don't have other options, we really can't pretend that we're making any progress, right? And one of the ways that we start to really overcome the fact that this is now generations is we implement reparations. We do something about that trillions of dollars of debt that is owed, because there's no catching up. There's no amount of programs that a financial institution can create that will deal with the fact that a majority of my family members were barred from owning property, from getting business licenses, from doing whatever, and pick a place in this country. There's nothing that will change the fact that a majority of white people even if you live in trailer parks, are just given opportunities as a result of the taking of land in this nation. So I think reparations for American descendants of slavery is absolutely critical. And we will be able to, in this next 100 years, take the reparations and the recompense that has been issued to Native folks and to Japanese people and descendants who were interned, and use that as a model. I think in the next 100 years, we're going to see a thriving, mutually beneficial network of women healers, and a respect for the craft and for the commitments and for the heart and for the legacy and for the history that healing requires. I know that to be the case because people are leaving corporate jobs and government jobs and education left and right. Doctors are giving up 6-figure salaries and 7-figure salaries to go back into our traditional practices. And that tells me that there is a breaking through that is among us. And I think, for me, most of my career was actually more directly related to national and international economic development. And in my travels, whether it's Iran or Venezuela or Colombia or other places, what I have found is that we are all victims of the same system that the small amount of people control. But so many of our neighbors don't get out of the neighborhoods. And that's across race and age and class, right? Like I know very well-off people right here in Minneapolis, right here in the Twin Cities, who haven't really traveled. And so I think in the next 100 years, we will be a more globally connected and globally respectful and globally resonant community that is not just doing that in some sort of charity mentality. It's not about going over there and making sure somebody else has water or making sure someone else has food, but it's about understanding how the socio-political structures constantly require us to try to negotiate our demands, negotiate our needs, negotiate any progress toward power. And then we will stop that because we will have family all over the world to help us learn from their challenges so that we don't recreate the same ones here. And then I think beyond that, I think, honestly, the United States, right? Like epicenter of many, many great things and many, many challenges. I think that when in the next 100 years, if we are serious about having a government and an education system and a housing system and an economy that truly reflects our communities, is truly demographically representative, then we are going to eliminate money in politics, and we're going to figure out how to establish some third and fourth parties in our country. I'm a dreamer.
Hi, hello. My name's Shaughnessy Johnson, and I work for UROC, and I'm also on a YPAR research team called UROC, and YPAR is Youth Participatory Action Research. And I'm going to be monitoring some of the questions from the participants. And I also have a question that was posed by my UROC research team. And that question is, and it's geared towards all your prospective workplaces and aspirations. So I'll read off the question and I'll also post it into the chat as well. So the question is, high school students who have lost their job due to COVID were unable to receive unemployment and stimulus money from federal and state governments. Many Black and Brown students whose jobs help support their families were left with two options: drop out of school to receive benefits or let their families struggle. How can you and your respective positions of power help lessen this dilemma?
I'll start. That's a great question. That same rule affected some of our college students too, who were working while they go to school, but were still dependents. And as a result, were unable. So there were two operational things we did. One was to join with other higher ed institutions to advocate with the federal government as they issued different tranches of aid resources to be more expansive. And the other was to philanthropically raise some student emergency funding that students could apply for directly in the meantime to try to gap fill. But those are operational challenges. I mean, that's a resolution of a symptom, not really a treatment of the underlying disease, around an awareness of how writing standards, when Sean talks about policy and who is at the table developing policy, that there is an absence of appreciation for affected communities. And so what we try to do is there is some influence by being the University of Minnesota, and we try to lend our voice to that, but we also try to educate people to be good policy makers with full appreciation for the fact that the current way in which we do it often misses. And so how do we create an environment where we advocate in real time, but also create an educational pipeline of future leaders who won't have the same miss. And it's imperfect, but that was our reaction to that specific issue as it came up.
I can go next, and I can appreciate that. What President Gable, you were just saying, has to be in conjunction and with pretty much every other institution stepping forward. And so I think that actually is the future solution, right? Like, what do we do to wrap around our students, not just in this moment where particular high school students have been really essentially displaced from academia as a force of trying to survive, but more so to think about, like, what does it mean even for students who are able to stay in and distance learning, and the fact that all of our schools aren't on the same page, and like, what does that mean for getting through your basic standards test and everything else that comes. I don't have kids, so I don't know all of the details about school, but this is just what I'm learning from my family and friends and from people who have students in. I'll share a little bit about what we did at the city of Minneapolis and how we're trying to use the fact that we are the largest city in the state of Minnesota and probably have the greatest percentage of Black and Brown students in our city of any place in the state of Minnesota, Hennepin County being the second largest, then sort of municipality, if you will. One thing that we did is pretty rapidly, we actually have a family and youth portion of our Minneapolis employment and training team at the city of Minneapolis. So people know their work primarily through Step Up. But what they don't know is all of the other services that Nina Robertson and her team actually deploy at the city of Minneapolis. So as this was going on, our team pretty rapidly started to go online and offer up training options to high school students to try to not train more students or train more talented people in our market who need work and income, but to actually get you placed. And we just need more of that. So we're actively, literally, I was on the phone with one of my, actually, I think this last couple of days have been like 6 hours with my workforce colleagues. And we're applying for some federal grants to get more money in to do that. The second is looking at the future of jobs. So tech is like one of the sectors in our economy that didn't crash when everything else did. And tech is really, really cool for lots of reasons, including that many of you I know are out building apps and games and things like that now that you have some time, if you have access to those devices. Tech also usually doesn't require a degree, and it's a beautiful way to get into mathematics and STEM in higher education. So we're also looking at pathways where we can get you trained within like 2 weeks or less to make $20 to $30 an hour on the job, and then have gainful careers within those fields. And what we find is, that's not ideal, right? We need you to be in school. Bottom line, we need you in school. And we also know that your families need you. But the bottom line is, we also know that right now, everybody is in survival. I was just telling a group today, while we're recovering from the damages to the built environment, we're still trying to survive COVID. We're not in recovery on COVID, and we have to acknowledge that. The third aspect is really working with our employers to match up their so-called job requirements with what they actually need. Sometimes you don't need a degree to do that thing. You need training. And like, can we work with our state partners and others to get that training? Again, being a high school student, we want to make sure that you're protected, that you aren't going to, above those reasonable work hours. But I think I'd say, again, the city of Minneapolis isn't responsible for the public school system, but we do have a responsibility on the workforce side. And so that's where most of our time has been spent. And then the final, this core strategy team of the Minneapolis Forward Community Now Coalition and First Sprint really highlighted this sort of long-term solutions to change. And one of the items lifted up was a universal basic income. Comes in many, many different forms. But what we're trying to figure out is there a way to start that so that our high school students in particular, our families with high school students or with public school students will have something to sustain yourselves so that we can move through the current reality. No solution just yet, just things that we're really trying to throw everything at it to get something to stick. What I will say is that the longer term reality that we're talking about, and so you hear about this in Northside Job Creation Team and others, is that it's always a challenge when you have a child of a parent making more and as a primary breadwinner in a household. And so that is actually the thing that we're trying to solve for, is that that's an imbalance on both parts that really just needs to be remedied. And now I think we have a shared desire to accelerate and rationale around acceleration of solutions. And drop a suggestion into the chat box because we need all of that, please.
I was just going to add that I think that part of the answer is that the institutions need to change. So clearly, there's some lessons that we are going to learn, that we're learning as a result of this pandemic, and that certainly is one of them. Is that how we deliver education through this institutional lens, and how do we break that up and understand how children and how people learn and how people gain skills. And then also, so one thing too is that on employers. So most of the staff at North Point are employees of Hennepin County. Hennepin County, one of the benefits that I am most proud of and brag about is that the county provides an educational reimbursement for every county employee. Doesn't matter what level you're at within the county, of $5,000, a little over $5,000 a year that you can use for your education. And it doesn't have to be that it's a field that is in line with your current job. But if you want to go to secondary school, you're eligible for that. And I think that is going to be a way that education is going to change. Is going to have to change, where employers are going to be able to offer that to employees. Because the sad thing is, and we all know that, is that why should someone graduate from a institution and you're automatically in huge debt, right? And why not disrupt that and figure out a way? I mean, there is no way that an education in this country should cause someone to go into debt, period. It is insane. So I think looking at the institution of education and also looking at the employers, making sure that there is a change in how people gain knowledge, how people gain skills, and how that is a value add. And it should not be one where it causes any young person to have to make a decision between I've got to drop out of school so that I can get a job to help my family so that we can live. No, that should never have to be a decision. Why is it that you could not be working and at the same time your employer is paying for your education? Because at the end of the day, it's a huge return on investment for an employer that is paying for the ongoing continuous learning, knowledge, education of their employees.
I would just add that I am grateful for the work of Youth Rock. I'm grateful for the part that Liberty Community Church has been able to play in that, and the profound work that UROC is doing around birthing and maintaining, sustaining Youth Rock. And having said that, there is power in your story. So YPAR gives you an opportunity to not only to do the research, but also to tell the story of what you have unearthed and uncovered. So I think that you have a vehicle at Youth Rock and at UROC to be able to get that story out. Because I work with, we have developed a program for high schoolers and was able to pay them well and continue to pay them well, I would also suggest that you look in the private sector. There are churches that are prominent in paying a great wage to young people. So I would suggest that you do that. But I would also suggest, and so, let me know off record, let me know what you need. But more important, I think that, or maybe equally as important, use the resource that you have. Y'all can tell this story. Tell the story, because I can tell you that a lot of people do not know the fact that you so graciously shared with us. And the other thing is use the power of your research and your influence to be able to change public policy. It's really, really critical and important. You have a voice, use your voice, and those places that you don't seem to be able to quite get in, let your elders know so that we can help you knock down those doors.
Okay, thank you all for sharing. And now I'm going to ask you the final and last question. And this comes from participant Leah Low Miller. And her question is, or their question is, at what point in your education or career did you see your potential to become a strong leader?
I'll be honest. For me, it wasn't in education. Actually, when I started college, I actually felt like it took me away from community, and it took me away from work. And so for me, it really started. I was actually doing anti-militarism work, and it was when folks in the public health sector said, "Oh, hey, Sean, we think you have something. Let us take you under the wing." So I think that it was more of a people who cared about young people reaching out, that I realized there's something there. And being an introvert, as I tried to go in, people wouldn't let me, so they'd keep pulling me out. It wasn't until probably my last couple of semesters of college that I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense now. This there's a purpose here. There's something else that I've learned. Mostly on the research side, actually. I think that for me, especially from an undergraduate standpoint, the greatest takeaway for me is two things, two great takeaways. My best friend, and talk about, sister friends, my best friend, and the power and the time to dedicate to research. And I'm using that to tell the history of how Black women have actually led our nation and have supported the growth of our nation. And yet our stories have been untold largely. So when they say each one reach one, it's real.
I'm just going to say that for me, and maybe it's part of being an introvert, I don't know. Even to this day, I don't always recognize attributes that I have for leadership. Along my path, when I think about it, it's always been somebody else who recognized it in me and nurtured it, or even would say, and even though I was resistant, they might say, you know what, you should do this. I think about, you're perfect for this. And when I was in college, and I majored in biology and chemistry, and I did it because I loved it. I mean, it was something that was natural for me. But I never thought about going to medical school. It was just never in my mind. And I remember a professor that I had in physiology, and he was also on the faculty, and this was in Iowa. So I started off in school in Iowa, but I finished at the university. And he has said to me, I think you would be great, and I could help you go to medical school. There are scholarships out there. And I kind of looked at him like he was, just descended somewhere from Mars. And I said, I'm not interested in going to what would make you think that I would be interested in going to medical school? And I told him, I said, I'm interested in research. And he said to me, well, you could do both. And it just never occurred to me that that was my path. And then fast forward, I look at where I'm at right now, but he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I always kept that in my mind, that especially now as I'm, supervising, MDs, I was like, somebody already saw that in me. It was almost like he knew that I had that capacity. So I say that to say that I think that that's one of the great responsibilities that we have, being in leadership roles or being in any role, is to speak up. When you see that in someone, speak it to them, and speak it often enough so that they believe it. Because there's so many, and we see that there's so many people who do not even see themselves as being successful or having the ability to be certain places or to walk certain paths. And you never know of what you can do about planting that seed, and to tell them, you know what, you are doing great, you have the ability to be a great leader. And then even going that step further, putting them in places where they can experience being a leader.
I'll follow that one. That's great answer. So, a sort of other side of what Stella just described, I've called in different moments what Stella just described as a tapped on the shoulder moment, where someone recognizes your talent and kind of brings you out of yourself and puts you on a trajectory that you might not have otherwise been on. And I've had those moments and been very, very grateful for them. But the real moments happened when I put myself on the trajectory. And I think what happened for me personally, and this is, as we've all said in different ways all afternoon, this is very, whatever works for you. But that I looked at people who were in positions that I aspired to that seemed maybe almost, when I was a college student or when I was first junior faculty, the president seemed like a character in a movie, right? And I'm sitting here now thinking, surely they were not, right? Because I know that they were not. Is that you look a couple of steps ahead and realize that they're thinking the same things you are. They have the same doubts you do. They have the same self-regulation of maybe it wasn't me, maybe I don't deserve to be here, maybe maybe it was imposter syndrome kind of thinking. And so therefore, the lesson of that is anyone can, who wants to. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. So leadership is, there are some people who are better at it than others. There's some people who sing better than others. There's some people who run faster than others, but everybody can sing and everybody can run in the right environment and in the right place. And there's no one who can't if they want to. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting to. And if you do want to, and you haven't been tapped on the shoulder and you're wondering why, then maybe you need to change your environment or seek out that kitchen cabinet. I call it a personal board of directors. That's sort of a goofy way to describe it, but you get the idea. The trusted people who love you and only want what's best for you, to help you ask them why. What am I doing wrong? Or what am I doing right, and why isn't anyone noticing it? And thinking about what that means for your trajectory and your path and how you define success for yourself.
Let me just say this. I don't think that I really don't identify as a leader. I appreciate the question. But what I do know is that the community calls you. And when we live in whole and well communities, I think everybody has leadership potential, but the courageous take on the mantle. So, and really the courage is not in having success, but it is knowing that if you say yes, you very well may fail. You may not get it done like everyone else's expectation. And I think that's part of the struggle, to identify that those places of courage. And I know this sounds trite, but I really don't mean it to be that. Do you remember that little children's book called The Little Engine That Could? And he says, I think I can, I know I can, I think I can, I know I can. Every day, leaders are born, every day. And it's really up to you to take it on. I don't want to be a leader because I like to be behind the scenes, but that's some good leadership that happens behind the scenes. I like other folk to be out there and on front and on point, but when also know the people that you can't say no to. When Makeda said, will you do this? And I typed her back, I don't know how to do it, but I will do whatever you ask me to do. That's real leadership. That's Makeda Zulu Gillespie. When others call you forward and you somehow or another get the courage to say, I know I can, I think I can. That's true leadership. And you are that, sister girl, you are that. Be that, because we need you. We need you desperately, and the rest of the Youth Rock crew. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you all for answering. And before I pass it off to Makeda, a couple people in the chat want to hear your response to the question as well. So at what point in your education or career did you see your potential to become a strong leader?
So I am much like Pastor Alika. I do not see myself as a leader. I'd like to lead from the back. I'm a great leader from the back. I love to be right in the back and push you and tell you which way to go. It's very different being in the front. But I do remember when I applied for this position or decided to apply for the position, I was talking about UROC and had gone on, someone had asked me a question that probably had a 10-second answer. And after about 15 minutes talking about UROC and the community and the university and the potential and blah, 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 I said, oh, I guess I think I need to be in charge. And so, and in charge to me is much how you all described it, though, is it's in charge with community. And by community, I mean those folks that are within the university, within the geographic area, within all the communities that we belong, finding a way to move those voices forward, to shine a light on them, to lift them higher. And so, I'm still figuring this thing out. But I'm scared much of the way at times, but I get much affirmation on a consistent basis telling me to go forward. And so I think I took some young people. So I used to work for the YMCA. As we close out, I used to work for the YMCA many years ago. And Harold Mazzell thought that all the folks from the urban core needed to get out to the woods. And that was the only way. If the adults took the young people, that then we would have more African-American young people as counselors and running directors of these camps. Of course, all the folks from the urban core were like, absolutely not. And he was very clear that was what was going to happen. Well, being raised the way that I was, my folks are from the South. I follow leadership. And so I took these young ladies up to Camp Minojan. It's on the Gunflint Trail, 7 hours north. And we had gotten, it was a hot day. We were carrying our backpacks. We were carrying the canoes. And we had a wonderful guide. But we had gotten to this place. It was so hot. We had gotten to this creek. But to get to the creek, there was like a little cliff you had to climb down. And everybody climbed down that cliff like it was nothing. And every one of my fears, you know, those negative voices that you have inside. I mean, I had this vision that I was going to fall trying to go down, and a helicopter needed to come and pull me out, and I was going to be on the news. And I cried and I sat up at the top. And you know what those young ladies did? They all climbed down that cliff and they got in that water and they started splashing around. And after I got through crying, I climbed myself down that hill and I got in that water with those young people leading the way. So I think a part of leadership is also surrounding yourself with others who are willing to jump when you're not, and will give you time and space to get there. So thank you for asking. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy days where people are pulling on you and you are making critical decisions that make our lives better. I appreciate each and every one of you. I do not take for granted the weight of the work that you do. I am here. If you call on me, I will do what you ask me to do. So know that continuously, but I thank you for taking time out for me and for this community to share today. And so as we close, we know we have to say thank you. I want to thank all of the UROC staff, and I want to name them: Geneva Davis, James DeSoto, Diane Gill, Nina Shepard, Jennifer Afefame, Jessica Forrester, Shaughnessy Johnson, and Chua Zhang for your work in making this run smoothly. But most of all, I want to thank you all, and I will start from the back and go to the front. Sean Pierce, Stella Whitney West, Pastor Alika Galloway, who tells me I need to call her just Alika Galloway, and President Joan T.A. Gable for your leadership, not just in the community, not just in the institutions, but also in your homes. And we didn't talk about that, but you all are great leaders in your friend circles and your families. So I thank you. In community, have a good night.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you.